As the days rolled on, the Beacon Theater incident continued to ripple through society in ways no one could have predicted. The event organizers were now under intense scrutiny, not just from the public, but also from their own partners and sponsors. What had started as a logistical hiccup had spiraled into a full-blown crisis that threatened to dismantle years of hard work and reputation building. The lead organizer, who had initially tried to smooth things over with a carefully worded apology, found herself drowning in meetings with lawyers, PR teams, and disgruntled stakeholders. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same question: how could this happen? The firings, which were meant to show accountability, only made matters worse. Former employees began speaking out publicly, sharing stories of how they'd been blindsided by the decision. Their accounts painted a picture of disarray and panic behind the scenes, a far cry from the polished image the organization had always projected. Sponsors, once eager to associate themselves with high-profile events like Michelle Obama's talk, were now hesitant. One major corporation released a scathing statement, calling the handling of the situation unacceptable and announcing it would sever ties until further notice. Another sponsor quietly withdrew its funding without comment, leaving the organization scrambling to fill the financial gap. Behind closed doors, whispers spread about whether the entire setup might collapse under the weight of bad press and legal battles. For the staff who had lost their jobs, life became a whirlwind of uncertainty. Many struggled to pay bills or explain the sudden termination to potential employers. Some turned to social media to share their side of the story, posting heartfelt messages about how unfair the situation felt. One former usher wrote, "We were just trying to do our jobs. No one told us why we were being fired. It was like we were thrown under the bus." His post went viral, garnering thousands of likes and comments from people expressing sympathy and outrage. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt remained at the center of it all. Her video response had struck a chord with millions, turning her into a polarizing yet influential figure overnight. Supporters hailed her as a champion of free speech, someone brave enough to stand up against perceived bias. Critics, however, doubled down on their accusations, labeling her a manipulator who thrived on drama. Despite the backlash, Karoline pressed forward, determined to use the spotlight for good. Her idea for the Front Row initiative gained momentum faster than anyone expected. Donations poured in from individuals and organizations eager to support her mission of fostering open dialogue. She assembled a small team of volunteers to help plan workshops, town halls, and online forums where people from different walks of life could come together to discuss controversial topics respectfully. The initiative wasn't just about politics. It was about creating spaces where everyone felt heard, regardless of their views. But launching such a project wasn't easy. Karoline faced criticism every step of the way. Opponents accused her of hypocrisy, claiming she only advocated for free speech when it suited her agenda. Others dismissed the Front Row initiative as nothing more than a publicity stunt designed to keep her name in the headlines. Through it all, Karoline stayed focused, reminding herself of the bigger picture. She spent countless hours answering emails, meeting with donors, and planning events. Late nights became the norm as she juggled interviews, appearances, and strategy sessions. Friends and family noticed the toll it took on her. She looked tired, her voice often hoarse from talking, but she refused to slow down. "If I stop now," she told a close friend over coffee one evening, "then what was all this for? This is bigger than me." Despite the challenges, there were moments of hope that kept her going. Messages of gratitude flooded her inbox daily, many from people who said her story had inspired them to speak up when they felt silenced. A teacher wrote to thank her for sparking classroom discussions about fairness and inclusion. A college student shared how the Front Row initiative gave him the courage to debate respectfully with peers who held opposing views. These stories reminded Karoline why she had chosen this path, to make a difference, even if it came at a personal cost. As the weeks passed, the controversy surrounding the Beacon Theater began to fade from the front pages. New scandals emerged, capturing the public's attention and pushing the seating debacle further into the background. But for those directly involved, the impact lingered. The fired staff members slowly pieced their lives back together, some finding new opportunities while others battled resentment. The event organizers worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, though many wondered if they'd ever fully recover from the damage done. And then there was Karoline, standing tall amidst the chaos. She had gone from being an attendee humiliated in front of hundreds to a national figure advocating for change. Whether loved or loathed, she had become impossible to ignore. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was clear. The Beacon Theater incident had changed her and countless others forever. In the end, the story wasn't just about a seat or a firing. It was about power, fairness, and the enduring human desire to be seen and heard. It was about mistakes made, lessons learned, and the resilience required to rise above adversity. For Karoline Leavitt, it was proof that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance to rewrite your narrative, and maybe even change the world along the way. As the dust slowly settled on the Beacon Theater incident, the world began to see glimpses of its long-term impact. For Michelle Obama, the event that was supposed to be a celebration of her memoir and a platform for unity had become entangled in controversy. Her team worked tirelessly to distance her from the chaos, but the association lingered like an unshakable shadow. People couldn't help but wonder, could she have done more to prevent the situation? Michelle herself remained mostly silent in the days following the scandal. Her schedule was packed with appearances, interviews, and book signings, leaving little room for public commentary. But behind the scenes, her advisors debated whether she should address the issue directly. Some argued that speaking out might only fan the flames, while others believed her voice could offer clarity and closure. Finally, after weeks of deliberation, Michelle released a carefully crafted statement. It was brief but heartfelt, written in the same tone she had used throughout her career, calm, compassionate, and measured. "I am deeply saddened by the events surrounding last night's gathering," she wrote. "My mission has always been to bring people together, not divide them. While I respect the decisions made by the organizers, I regret any actions that may have caused harm or discomfort." The response was immediate. Supporters praised her grace and diplomacy, saying her words embodied the spirit of understanding she had always championed. Critics, however, weren't satisfied. They argued that her statement fell short of addressing the root cause of the problem, that someone had been singled out based on their views. Social media lit up once again with hashtags like Doisha or What Would Michelle Do trending as people speculated about what she truly thought of the situation. Despite the mixed reactions, Michelle's statement marked a turning point in the narrative. It shifted the focus back to the core values she represented: unity, empathy, and resilience. For Karoline Leavitt, this posed a unique challenge. On one hand, she appreciated Michelle's acknowledgement of the discomfort caused. On another, she felt the former First Lady's words lacked teeth, failing to condemn the exclusionary behavior that had led to her removal. Karoline seized the opportunity to respond publicly. In a follow-up video posted on her social media channels, she thanked Michelle for her statement but urged her to take a stronger stance. "Unity isn't just about bringing people together who already agree with you," Karoline said, looking straight into the camera. "It's about making space for those whose perspectives challenge us. That's how we grow. That's how we heal." Her message struck a chord with many viewers, especially younger audiences who admired her boldness. Memes and GIFs of Karoline delivering her impassioned plea went viral, further cementing her status as a cultural lightning rod. Late-night comedians joked about her persistence, dubbing her the woman who wouldn't stay seated. Even detractors admitted that her ability to command attention was impressive, if not admirable. Meanwhile, the Front Row initiative gained traction at an astonishing pace. What started as a small grassroots effort quickly evolved into a nationwide movement. Local chapters sprang up in cities across the country, hosting town halls, panel discussions, and workshops aimed at fostering open dialogue. Schools reached out, asking Karoline to speak to students about navigating disagreements respectfully. Community leaders invited her to moderate debates on divisive issues ranging from climate change to healthcare reform. One particularly memorable event took place in a small Midwest town known for its deep political divides. Residents gathered in a community center, skeptical but curious, It was one of those nights that people talk about for years. The Beacon Theater in New York City was buzzing with excitement, filled to the brim with some of the biggest names you could imagine: politicians, celebrities, journalists, and influencers alike. Everyone had gathered there for a special evening featuring none other than Michelle Obama. She wasn't just giving a speech. She was sharing stories from her life, promoting her latest memoir, and inspiring thousands with her words. Energy in the room was electric. People dressed to impress, cameras flashing as attendees posed for photos before taking their seats. Among them was a woman who had recently become quite well known in political circles. Her name? Karoline Leavitt. Some called her bold, others said she was controversial, but no one could deny that she had made waves online with her sharp opinions and fearless take on current affairs. And tonight she had scored herself a golden ticket, a VIP seat right near the stage where Michelle Obama would soon be speaking. Karoline walked into the theater confidently, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She held her ticket tightly, double-checking the details to make sure everything was in order. "Front row," she muttered under her breath, smiling to herself. This was her moment, a chance to sit among the elite and soak up every word from one of the most admired women in the world. But while Karoline felt ready for the night ahead, not everyone shared her enthusiasm. As guests settled into their seats, whispers started spreading through the crowd. A few people recognized her instantly. "Isn't that the woman who's always criticizing progressive policies?" someone murmured. Another person leaned over and replied, "Yeah, I saw her tweets last week. They were pretty intense." These hushed conversations floated around like ripples in a pond, growing louder as more people noticed her presence. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, things weren't running as smoothly as they seemed. The event organizers were scrambling to tie up loose ends, making sure everything was perfect for Michelle Obama's grand entrance. But amidst the chaos, a name kept popping up in urgent discussions: Karoline Leavitt. Someone had flagged her earlier, raising concerns about how her views might clash with the tone of the evening. After all, this was supposed to be a unifying event, a celebration of hope and resilience, not a battleground for political debates. As the lights dimmed and the audience began to quiet down, anticipation built. Michelle Obama was moments away from stepping onto the stage. But just then, something unexpected happened. Security personnel appeared near the front row, their expressions serious but calm. They approached Karoline, leaning down to speak softly but firmly. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," one of them said, gesturing toward the aisle. Karoline froze, confusion washing over her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "This is my seat. My ticket says so." The head usher stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's been a change. Your seat has been reassigned due to logistical reasons." He avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the task at hand. Logistical reasons? Karoline couldn't believe what she was hearing. Here she was, holding a legitimate ticket, only to be told she couldn't stay in her assigned spot. Humiliation burned inside her chest as heads turned and curious eyes locked onto her. She glanced around, feeling the weight of judgment pressing down on her. Still, she refused to back down without a fight. "You can't just move me because you don't like who I am," she shot back, her frustration spilling out. Despite her protests, the security team remained firm. Reluctantly, Karoline stood up, clutching her ticket stub like it was her last defense. She followed them to the back of the theater, her mind racing with questions. Why was this happening? Who decided she didn't belong here? And most importantly, what came next? As she took her new seat far from the stage, the spotlight shifted elsewhere. Michelle Obama appeared, greeted by thunderous applause. But for Karoline, the magic of the evening had already been tarnished. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a chain reaction that would leave everyone involved reeling and change the course of her life forever. As Karoline Leavitt made her way to the back of the theater, her emotions were a tangled mess. She felt angry, embarrassed, and confused all at once. The walk from the front row to the rear seats felt like an eternity. Every step drew more attention than she wanted, with people craning their necks to see what the commotion was about. Some looked sympathetic, others amused, and a few even seemed smug. When she finally reached her new seat in the last row, she sank into it, trying to compose herself. But it wasn't easy. Her mind raced with questions. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? She glanced down at her ticket again as if hoping it would somehow explain everything. It clearly stated VIP section, but now she was stuck in the nosebleed section, miles away from where she was supposed to be. Meanwhile, Michelle Obama had taken the stage, and the crowd erupted into applause. The former First Lady began speaking, her voice smooth and commanding, instantly captivating everyone in the room. People leaned forward in their seats, hanging onto her every word. But for Karoline, it was hard to focus. The sting of being publicly humiliated still lingered, gnawing at her confidence. Instead of listening to Michelle's inspiring message, she found herself replaying the scene over and over in her head. Backstage, things weren't any calmer. Word of Karoline's removal had spread quickly among the event staff. One of the organizers, a stressed-out woman juggling multiple responsibilities, was already fuming when she heard about what had happened. She stormed into a small office, where the seating coordinator sat nervously, papers scattered across the desk. "What on earth were you thinking?" the organizer snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "Do you realize who that woman is? Do you know how much trouble this could cause?" the seating coordinator stammered, trying to defend himself. "We got reports that she might disrupt the event. Someone flagged her earlier because of her reputation." "Reputation?" the organizer interrupted, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "So instead of handling it discreetly, you decided to make a scene in front of hundreds of people? Are you serious?" The tension in the room was palpable. Both of them knew they were in deep trouble. This wasn't just some minor hiccup. It was a full-blown crisis waiting to explode. Social media never slept, and something like this wouldn't stay hidden for long. Sure enough, whispers had already started spreading through the audience. Phones were out, capturing videos and photos of Karoline being escorted away. Within minutes, hashtags like Der Seatgate and Front Row Controversy began trending online. While the backstage drama unfolded, Karoline tried to keep her composure. She pulled out her phone and opened Twitter, scrolling through the endless stream of reactions. At first, there were just a handful of posts mocking her situation. "Guess she didn't have a VIP personality to match her VIP ticket," one user joked. Another chimed in with, "Maybe next time she'll learn not to ruffle feathers before big events." But it didn't take long for the narrative to shift. Supporters of Karoline started flooding social media, defending her right to attend the event without being singled out. "This isn't about her views, it's about basic fairness," one tweet read. If her ticket said VIP, then she deserved to sit there. Others pointed out the irony of removing someone from an event meant to promote unity and understanding. "Isn't this exactly the kind of division we're trying to avoid?" another post asked. Feeling a mix of vindication and frustration, Karoline fired off a quick reply to some of the comments. "For the record," she wrote, "I came here tonight to listen and learn, not to cause problems. Being kicked out of my seat for no good reason is unacceptable." Her response only fueled the fire. More people joined the conversation, debating whether her removal was justified or if it was an overreaction. Some argued that her outspoken nature made her a liability at such a high-profile event. Others insisted that silencing dissenting voices went against the very principles Michelle Obama stood for. As the debate raged online, the event organizers realized they were sitting on a ticking time bomb. They called an emergency meeting, gathering everyone involved in the seating arrangements. The atmosphere was tense, with staffers exchanging nervous glances. No one wanted to be the scapegoat for this disaster. "We need answers, and fast," the lead organizer barked, pacing back and forth. "Who authorized this decision? And why wasn't I informed sooner?" A junior staff member hesitantly raised his hand. It came from higher up," he admitted. Someone thought it would be better to relocate her discreetly, but obviously, That didn't happen. The lead organizer groaned, rubbing her temples. Discreetly? You call dragging her out of her seat in front of everyone discreet? This is a nightmare. With no clear solution in sight, tempers flared. Accusations flew left and right, each person pointing fingers at someone else. In the end, the lead organizer made a dress. By the time Michelle Obama wrapped up her speech, the Beacon Theater was buzzing, not just with admiration for the former First Lady, but with whispers about what had happened earlier. Karoline Leavitt's forced move from the front row to the back of the theater had become the talk of the town, even before people stepped outside. As attendees filed out of their seats, conversations echoed through the halls. "Did you see that woman being escorted out?" one person asked their friend. "I heard she caused some kind of scene." No, another chimed in, shaking their head. "She didn't cause anything. They just moved her because of who she is. It's ridiculous." Opinions were divided, and tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some defended the decision, saying it was probably for the best to avoid any potential disruptions during such an important event. Others thought it was unfair and unnecessary, arguing that everyone deserved to enjoy the evening regardless of their views or reputation. While the audience debated, the real storm was brewing backstage. The firings had sent shockwaves through the staff, leaving many reeling from the suddenness and severity of the decision. Those who hadn't been directly involved in the seating fiasco were scrambling to understand how things had escalated so quickly. One of the newly unemployed ushers sat on a bench outside the theater, staring blankly at his phone. He scrolled through social media, watching as videos and memes about the incident flooded timelines. His hands trembled slightly as he read comments calling him and his colleagues incompetent. "We were just doing our jobs," he muttered under his breath, frustration building inside him. How were we supposed to know this would blow up like this? Nearby, a ticket coordinator leaned against a wall, tears streaming down her face. She had worked tirelessly to ensure every detail of the event ran smoothly, only to be scapegoated for something she barely had control over. "They made us look like villains," she said to a colleague, her voice cracking. "All I did was follow instructions. Now I'm jobless because someone upstairs panicked." The chaos wasn't limited to the staff either. Sponsors of the event, who had poured thousands of dollars into making it a success, were starting to distance themselves from the controversy. One major corporation issued a statement saying they were deeply concerned about the handling of the situation and hinted at reconsidering future partnerships. Another sponsor pulled its funding entirely, citing reputational risks. For an event meant to inspire unity and hope, the backlash was anything but unifying. As news of the firing spread, outrage grew louder both online and offline. People began questioning whether the punishment fit the crime. Was firing an entire team really the right response to a seating mix-up? Many argued that it set a dangerous precedent, punishing low-level employees for decisions likely made by higher-ups. Legal experts weighed in too, suggesting that the fired staff might have grounds for wrongful termination lawsuits. Back at the heart of the storm, Karoline Leavitt was oblivious to the full extent of the fallout. Still seated in the back row, she clutched her phone tightly, scrolling through tweets and replies. Her initial embarrassment had given way to anger and determination. She knew she had been wronged, and now the world seemed to agree with her. Her supporters rallied around her, flooding social media with messages of solidarity. "Karoline didn't deserve this treatment," one tweet read. "Freedom of speech means nothing if we silence voices we don't like." Others shared stories of similar incidents where individuals had been excluded or mistreated based on their beliefs. Slowly but surely, the narrative shifted. What started as a story about a seating mishap transformed into a broader conversation about fairness, free expression, and accountability. But not everyone was on her side. Critics accused Karoline of playing the victim card, claiming she was using the incident to gain sympathy and boost her profile. "This isn't about principle, it's about publicity," one commenter wrote. "She's loving every second of this attention." Despite the mixed reactions, Karoline couldn't deny that the incident had catapulted her into the spotlight. Reporters began reaching out, asking for interviews. News outlets wanted exclusive statements, Even late-night talk show hosts joked about the drama, further amplifying the story. By the end of the night, it was clear that this wasn't going to fade away anytime soon. Sitting alone in her hotel room later that evening, Karoline reflected on everything that had happened. She replayed the moment she was asked to leave her seat, the humiliation of walking past rows of curious eyes, and the overwhelming support she received afterward. Part of her felt guilty for the staff members who had lost their jobs because of her, but another part of her felt vindicated, like she'd been given a chance to prove a point. This isn't just about me, she thought aloud, pacing back and forth in her room. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. With renewed resolve, she grabbed her phone and opened a notes app. She started jotting down ideas for a video, a message to her followers explaining exactly what had happened and why it mattered. She wanted to address the criticisms head-on, while also thanking those who had stood by her. Most importantly, she wanted to turn this negative experience into something positive, something that could spark meaningful change. As she typed away, her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe this was her moment to step into a bigger role, to use her platform to advocate for others who had faced similar injustices. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain. Karoline Leavitt was ready to fight back, and she wasn't going to let anyone silence her again. The next morning, the story of Karoline Leavitt's removal from the VIP seat was everywhere. It dominated headlines, talk shows, and social media feeds. People couldn't stop talking about it. Some saw her as a victim of unfair treatment, while others dismissed her as someone who thrived on controversy. Regardless of where people stood, one thing was undeniable. The incident had struck a nerve. Karoline woke up to a barrage of notifications on her phone. Her inbox was flooded with interview requests from major news outlets, podcast hosts, and even late-night TV producers. Social media platforms were ablaze with hashtags like #StandWithCaroline and Seatgate. Supporters praised her resilience, calling her a symbol of standing up against censorship. Critics, however, accused her of exaggerating the situation for personal gain. The divide between the two sides only grew wider as the day went on. Determined to take control of the narrative, Karoline decided to release a video addressing the incident. She knew this was her chance to speak directly to her followers and explain her side of the story without filters or interruptions. Sitting in front of a plain white wall in her hotel room, she turned on her camera and took a deep breath before hitting record. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I'm sure by now you've heard about what happened last night at the Beacon Theater. I showed up with a ticket that said VIP seat, only to be told I had to leave my assigned spot and move to the back of the theater. Why? Because of who I am and the views I hold." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "Let me be clear, I didn't go there to cause trouble. I went there to listen, to learn, and to support an event that promised unity and understanding. Instead, I was humiliated in front of hundreds of people, all because someone decided my presence wasn't welcome." Her words resonated deeply with many viewers. Some nodded along as they watched, feeling a sense of injustice on her behalf. Others appreciated her honesty, seeing her as someone willing to call out wrongdoing even when it came at a personal cost. But not everyone was convinced. Skeptics argued that Karoline was milking the situation for attention, pointing out her history of provocative statements and polarizing opinions. As the video gained traction online, it sparked heated debates across various platforms. On Twitter, threads exploded with arguments about free speech versus decorum at high-profile events. Facebook groups dedicated to politics dissected every detail of the incident, with members passionately defending their positions. Even Reddit forums lit up with memes and commentary, some mocking Karoline while others hailed her as a champion of individual rights. Meanwhile, the fallout continued to ripple through the event organizers' camp. The lead organizer, overwhelmed by the backlash, called an emergency press conference to address the growing scandal. Standing behind a podium flanked by logos of sponsors, she looked visibly stressed as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. "We regret any discomfort," caused during last evening's event, she said, reading from a prepared statement. Our goal has always been to create a welcoming environment for all attendees. Unfortunately, mistakes were made in handling a seating adjustment, and we are taking full responsibility for those errors. When asked about the firings, she hesitated before responding. Decisions were made under immense pressure to resolve the situation swiftly. While these actions may seem extreme, months had passed since the Beacon Theater incident, but its echoes still reverberated through the lives of everyone involved. For Karoline Leavitt, the whirlwind of attention and activity had transformed her from a relatively unknown political strategist into a household name. Her face appeared on magazine covers, her voice filled radio waves, and her story inspired heated discussions across dinner tables and social media feeds. Yet despite the fame, or perhaps because of it, Karoline found herself grappling with the weight of what she had set in motion. The Front Row initiative had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. What started as a small idea scribbled on a notepad during a sleepless night had blossomed into a nationwide movement. Town halls were packed, online forums buzzed with activity, and schools began incorporating lessons about respectful dialogue into their curriculums. People from all walks of life, teachers, students, parents, activists, reached out to thank her for creating spaces where they felt safe to express themselves without fear of judgment or retaliation. But success came at a cost. As the initiative expanded, so did the pressure. Every decision Karoline made was scrutinized under a microscope. Critics accused her of profiteering off the movement, pointing to the influx of donations and sponsorships as evidence of ulterior motives. Others dismissed the Front Row initiative as performative activism, claiming it lacked tangible outcomes. Supporters defended her fiercely, praising her dedication and transparency, but the constant barrage of negativity wore her down. Late one evening, after wrapping up a virtual panel discussion with community leaders, Karoline sat alone in her apartment staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. Notifications blinked relentlessly, messages of gratitude mixed with hateful comments calling her everything from a hero to a fraud. She sighed deeply, rubbing her temples. The adrenaline that had carried her through months of nonstop work was beginning to fade, leaving behind exhaustion and doubt. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. It was a text from an old friend. "Hey, you okay? Haven't heard from you in a while." The simplicity of the message caught her off guard. In the chaos of building the Front Row initiative, she had neglected personal connections, the people who mattered most when times got tough. Guilt washed over her as she realized how long it had been since she'd truly connected with anyone outside of work. Determined to reclaim some semblance of balance, Karoline decided to take a weekend off, a rare luxury in her jam-packed schedule. She drove to a quiet cabin in the mountains, leaving her phone behind except for emergencies. Surrounded by towering trees and crisp air, she allowed herself to breathe for the first time in months. Sitting by a crackling fire, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The humiliation of being removed from her seat, the anger that fueled her initial response, and the countless late nights spent pouring her heart into something bigger than herself. By the time she returned home, she felt rejuvenated but also more aware of the challenges ahead. The movement needed structure if it was going to sustain itself long-term. With renewed focus, she assembled a team of trusted advisors, people passionate about fostering open dialogue and committed to ensuring the initiative remained authentic. Together, they developed plans for training programs, educational resources, and partnerships with grassroots organizations across the country. As winter approached, the Front Row initiative reached another milestone, its first annual summit. Held in a sprawling convention center, the event drew thousands of attendees eager to learn, share, and connect. Panels featured speakers from diverse backgrounds, politicians, artists, educators, and everyday citizens united by their desire to bridge divides. Workshops taught practical skills like active listening and conflict resolution, while breakout sessions encouraged participants to engage in difficult conversations. On the final day of the summit, Karoline took the stage to deliver the closing remarks. Dressed simply in a navy blazer and jeans, She walked to the podium to thunderous applause. The crowd rose to their feet, cheering and clapping as she smiled humbly, waiting for the noise to subside. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "When I stood in that theater months ago, humiliated and angry, I never imagined this moment would come. I didn't know then that losing my seat would lead me to find my purpose." She paused, scanning the sea of faces before her. "This isn't about me, it's about all of us. About finding ways to listen even when it's hard. About making space for voices that challenge us. About remembering that disagreement doesn't mean disrespect." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded or wiped away tears. When she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause once again. This time, though, it wasn't just for her. It was for the collective effort of everyone who had contributed to the movement's growth. In the weeks following the summit, momentum continued to build. Schools adopted the Front Row Initiative's curriculum, teaching kids as young as 8 years old how to navigate disagreements respectfully. Corporations partnered with the organization to train employees in effective communication. Even politicians referenced the principles of open dialogue in speeches, crediting Karoline's work for inspiring change. Yet, amidst the progress, challenges persisted. Critics remained vocal, questioning whether the initiative could truly create lasting impact. Legal battles stemming from the Beacon Theater firings dragged on, casting a shadow over the organization responsible for the event. And Karoline herself faced moments of self-doubt, wondering if she was doing enough or if the movement might falter without her constant involvement. Still, she pressed forward, driven by the belief that change was possible, one conversation at a time. She reminded herself daily of the stories she'd heard from participants whose lives had been touched by the Front Row Initiative. A teacher who used the program to mediate conflicts among students. A family divided by politics finding common ground around the dinner table. A teenager gaining the confidence to speak up in class after attending a workshop. These stories kept her grounded, reminding her why she had started this journey in the first place. The Beacon Theater incident may have begun as a moment of humiliation, but it had become a catalyst for something far greater. A reminder that resilience, courage, and determination could turn adversity into opportunity. And so, Karoline Leavitt continued to push forward, knowing that while the road ahead was uncertain, she was no longer walking it alone. The months that followed the summit marked a turning point, not just for Karoline Leavitt, but for the countless lives touched by the Front Row Initiative. What had started as a reaction to an embarrassing and unjust moment at the Beacon Theater had evolved into something far bigger than anyone could have predicted. It wasn't just about one woman reclaiming her dignity anymore. It was about creating spaces where everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. Karoline's calendar remained packed, but now she approached her work with a clearer sense of purpose. She learned to delegate tasks, trusting her growing team to handle logistics while she focused on what she did best, inspiring others through storytelling and advocacy. Her speeches became less about herself and more about the collective power of communities coming together. "This isn't my movement," she often said during interviews. "It belongs to all of us." Despite her efforts to stay grounded, fame continued to bring challenges. Some days, scrolling through social media felt like stepping into a battlefield. For every supportive message, there were harsh criticisms accusing her of exploiting the controversy for personal gain. Trolls mocked her appearance, questioned her intelligence, and even threatened her safety. At times, the negativity hit hard, leaving her drained and questioning whether the fight was worth it. But then, something remarkable happened. Supporters began rallying around her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Fans created hashtags like "Stand with Karoline," flooding comment sections with positivity whenever trolls attacked. Others sent heartfelt letters sharing how her story had inspired them to stand up for themselves or start difficult conversations they'd been avoiding. Teachers wrote to thank her for providing tools to help students navigate disagreements respectfully. Parents shared stories of using initiative resources to mend strained relationships within their families. These moments kept her going. They reminded her that behind every cruel comment was a real person struggling to connect, and that maybe, just maybe, Her work could help bridge those gaps. Meanwhile, the legal battle stemming from the firings at the Beacon Theater dragged on, casting a long shadow over the event organizers. Former employees who had lost their jobs filed lawsuits alleging wrongful termination, seeking compensation for lost wages and emotional distress. The court cases garnered significant media attention, reigniting debates about accountability and fairness in high-pressure environments. Many wondered if justice would ever truly be served.